All right, so this one is section 6.5, equations with rational expressions. And one of the new things we'll have to pay attention to is that you cannot divide by 0. And so if one of your solutions ends up being a restriction, then that can't be a solution. And so it's extraneous because it's a restriction. You can also have restrictions because of context, as we saw with other word problems. So there's a couple methods for solving rational expressions. One way that works for all cases, and then one way that works in some cases that can often be easier. So a lot of times in an Algebra 1 course, you see that when you have a proportion, a fraction equal to another fraction, you can cross multiply. But that only works well in certain circumstances. So for example, here I was able to cross multiply and distribute appropriately here, and I got a quadratic. And I know how to factor and solve quadratics or use quadratic formula to solve it, and so that's fine. But if this had been like a squared or a cubed or something, then I would have had a higher degree, and so it would have been hard for us to solve it with our knowledge and so far with Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. So this other method of the LCD is great in any case. So the idea here is that, again, we don't like fractions, so we can clear them by using the LCD. So we have 5x and x, so the lowest common denominator would be 5 and x, so 5x. And so if I multiply both sides of the equation by the LCD, then I get an equation that doesn't have fractions anymore, just like at the very beginning of this course. And then I solve that. What's kind of nice about that too is sometimes it results in having your extraneous solutions not even show up. So like this 0 didn't even show up. The 0 being extraneous because you cannot divide by 0. And to check your work, you plug it into the original problem. You also check to see if your answers are restrictions. The restriction here is just that x cannot be 0. So here's another example where you can't really cross multiply because of this -1. In order to have used cross multiplying, you would have had to get a common denominator, combine these into a single fraction, and then you could cross multiply. So it's not that it can't be done, it just would be a lot more work. So the LCD, the lowest common denominator method, would be looking at the denominators, m-8, 1, and m-8. Lowest common one is going to be m-8. So distributing that, to multiplying it to both sides. Excuse me. I end up with 1 minus m plus 8. There is the that's an interesting way of doing it. Hold on. That is a very weird way I did it there. Let's do it together here. So m minus 8. And then m minus 8. So it's like m minus 8 over 1. So the m minus 8s would cancel and give me 1 minus m minus 8 times, times a -1. Okay, so we'll have negative m plus 8. I just didn't show that as clearly before. So 7m minus 56. And then we can solve it from there. So, oops. I'm just messing up on this one. These cancel out, just 7. So m minus 8 times 1 over m minus 8, those cancel, leaving you with 1. M minus 8 times -1 gives you negative m plus 8. 7 over m minus 8. The m minus 8s will cancel, leaving you just with 7. 9. Subtract 9. Divide by negative 1. And then m could not have been 8. That's the only restriction. So this should work out, but it wouldn't hurt to check your work. And the check is over here. And you can use your calculator to help you do the check with the arithmetic if you want. Okay, now on this, when I factor the bottom, I have y plus 3 and y plus 1. So my lowest common denominator would be y plus 3 and y plus 1. So when I distribute that to each of these will cross cancel, leaving me with 4y. The y plus 3s will cancel for this one, and the y plus 1 for this. So here's my lowest common denominator that I'm multiplying by my LCD, and I did it to each term. So I'm left with 4y here, 6y plus 6 when I distribute, and 4y plus 12 when I distribute. Combining like terms and solving for y, I end up with y equals negative 3. But y could not be negative 3 or negative 1 because that would make you divide by 0. So that's not a possible solution. It's an extraneous or fake solution. And so my one and only solution is not actually a solution. So your answer is no solution. Okay, your lowest common denominator here, x and x squared, will be x squared. Do it to each term. Then you have a trinomial, factor it to solve this one. It isn't linear like this last one. You'll have to solve it by factoring. That's how we do trinomials. This had an a that was not 1, so we're going to do a times c. And then put your b, figure out what works. Split that middle term up using those values. Do your factor by grouping, so cut it in half, factor each half. Don't forget you're factoring a negative here, so you'll change your sign. Factor out the common part. There's your leftovers. Figure out what makes this 0, because 0 times anything would be 0. Figure out what makes this 0, because anything times 0 is 0. And then here's yet another example where when I factor the denominator, I have a y minus 5. I already have the y minus 5 mentioned, a y plus 5. So you don't need to duplicate. You just need to say all the things that are in the denominator, all the factors that are in a denominator is what you multiply by. And some of these cancel, so then I FOILed that. These canceled, so I multiplied those. And again, I have a quadratic, so I make it equal to 0. I factor it, and I figure out what makes it 0. One of my answers was 5, the other was negative 4. But 5 was a restriction, so would 0 have been, or negative 5? Negative 4 is fine. I checked it to make sure, and it does work out. So again, even though it looks like, oh, these are nice answers, you do need to check for those extraneous solutions because of context or because of when it's undefined. Any questions on 6.5?
No, I don't have any.
Okay. Lastly is 6.6.